Now, most of you are already aware of the Interbrand Best Global Brand Survey, but Interbrands this year decided to launch its Indian edition called the Best Indian Brands, which looks at top Indian origin brands that have not only made a mark in the country, but have also managed to spread their wings internationally, making them significant global businesses. I caught up with Jez Frampton, the global CEO of Interbrands, to get a sense of how this was done, the methodology, where Indian brands stand today on the world stage, and everything in between. Take it over. Thank you so much for joining us, Jez. Truly a pleasure to have you on Brand Equity.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in India.
So many congratulations. I mean, I have many things to congratulate you about. But first things first, when you were doing this survey, focusing on, homegrown Indian brands, was there a thread you could tie, into all the emerging markets in terms of a life cycle of where they stand, so to speak, and some attributes in display?
I mean, one of the differences, I suppose, about India is that there's a large number of conglomerate businesses,
sure.
So Tata, Reliance, Godrej, etc., which is peculiar. Although when you look at Korea, of course, the way that their business is structured, there's a lot of very big businesses, Samsung, etc. So there's some similarity there. Brazil's a different game entirely again. And then if you look into, Russia is one that we will probably get to in a couple of years' time. Again, very different business structure. I suppose the thing that holds it together is a lot of the companies have fantastic manufacturing backgrounds. They run very good businesses. The opportunity now is to build some fantastically desirable global brands.
Right. So when you did this survey, obviously you've looked at Indian brands that have global businesses.
Yes.
And that must have been the point where you stopped, because, how many of these are really global brands, have really arrived on the world stage?
I think that's the point, actually. Not many of them is the answer. But then if you dig a little deeper, if you take somebody like Tata, who's the number one brand on our survey this year, they own brands like Jaguar, Land Rover, Tetley, which are extremely global brands in their own right. So again, there's a slight difference in the way that we look at what we're doing in India compared to what we do within Best Global Brands, for instance.
Right.
Because in that instance, we don't look at holding companies
right.
like Procter & Gamble or Unilever. We'll look at the operating brands within them like Dove or Pampers.
Why did you decide to look at conglomerates here as opposed to do it the traditional way where you look at particular brands?
Well, I think as far as looking at Indian business is concerned, it's the way it's structured. So if we didn't look at that, then we'd be doing a disservice on the inside, i.e. to Indian commentators and businesses, because that's the way they're structured, and it's the way that Indian people understand them. So if I can talk to anybody in the street, they know who Tata are. They'll also probably be able to name a number of different operating brands underneath them. If you take Tata, for instance, they do actually market cars and various other things under their own brand. So I don't think we're distorting the way that we look at it. We're actually trying to look at the reality of India, which is different from some other parts of the world.
Have Indian brands realized, while they're all looking to spread their wings, and some of them have done that quite successfully, have they realized that now to become a global player, to be taken seriously, you need to shed the garb of being Indian, regional, local, so to speak, and take on a more universal avatar?
Yeah, I think the key word there is universal. Great brands that do well across the world have a very clever way of connecting with people on a very human level. So Coca-Cola is number one on our Best Global Brands list, and the nature of happiness and refreshment is something that you can apply to any human being anywhere in the world. So the start point has to be really that you have something which appeals very broadly to people of different nationalities, different cultures, different backgrounds. Then the trick or the challenge, if you like, is to really understand how to make it relevant to the local market. So again, if you use Coca-Cola as an example, that they have an overall perspective about their brand, which is about happiness. But then what makes you happy in India might be different from China, might be different from London. And you have to understand that in order to make it work. And that is the challenge, I think, for a lot of the Indian brands, is to be able to stand up above their Indian heritage.
Another interesting takeaway from those brands is that majority of those names came from the banking sector. So
about 8, I think, in the top 30.
So that was very, very interesting to see that banking was so high on the consumer's mind. I mean, that is really a revelation of sorts. Any insights as to why banking was so big?
Well, you've got to remember that this league table is about value, and there are three things that go into generating a brand value that we look at, one of which is your earnings stream. Where does your earnings come from, or where do they come from, to be precise? The second thing is the role of the brand. How important is the brand in purchase? And it's literally, we break it down to a percentage. We know that if it's a bank, it's between X% and Y%, and if it's a luxury good, then it's somewhere else again. And so that then gives you the proportion of your earnings which are derived by your brand. The second thing we then look at is something called brand strength, which is effectively a loyalty measure. What it does is it enables us to predict how far into the future you're likely to be able to play a differentiated game and succeed against your competition. These three things come together. Now, one of the things that's absolutely sure is that if you are a large company which turns over an enormous amount of earnings, which a lot of banks do, then you will have a high brand value even though your brand might be relatively less important in the purchase process. So if you take something like Ferrari, it's massively important in the purchase. The brand, you're not just buying a fast piece of machinery, you're buying a statement about yourself and where you are in the world and everything else. Brand's massively important. Your current account, your bank, it might have less to play in it, although as we all know, we're more liable to get divorced than we are to change our banks. So there's a tremendous amount of trust in there. But relatively, the brand is less important. The difference between a big bank and Ferrari is the sheer scale of the earnings.
So the India perception issue, India as a country and its perception, does not impact Indian businesses or brands, you're saying?
I mean, it's quite a bizarre thing. I come from the UK, and certainly up until 10 years ago, most people thought that Ford was a British company. It's absolutely not. It's American. So many of these global brands do a very, very good job of just representing globalness. I think a lot of people probably do know that McDonald's is American and do know that BMW is German, but it isn't the reason why they love them. The reason why they love them is because they've created a sense of relevance in their home market. I think that's the opportunity for Indian brands. So I don't think that your country of origin, so to say, is really a big driver of whether you will be successful on the global stage or not.
Maybe one Indian brand and one Chinese brand that you think in the foreseeable future will make it to the best global brands.
Well, I think that one of them would obviously have to be Tata, which is the number one brand. I am a big fan of Tata. I'm actually a big fan of Indian business. I think there's an incredible endeavour here. In China, I'd look at companies like Lenovo or Huawei as potentials who might get onto the best global brands list at some point in the near future. The problem is that their brands aren't punching the weight that they need to in order to become a genuine contender yet.
Thank you so much, Jez. Truly a pleasure and all the very best.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Now, INTERBRAND'S hosted an evening to commemorate and acknowledge the top Indian brands that made it to this list at the Taj Mahal in Mumbai. And what an evening it was. The who's who made their presence felt and was soon engrossed in a very interesting debate on what Indian brands need to do to make a mark globally. Here are some bits by sights and sounds from that rather glittering evening.
It's a great pleasure to be here. We have a brand and a business of first, and that is very crucial for us. Branding is also deployed to realize global ambition.
I'm so happy to see where we stood in the victory.
It has opened the eyes to the possibilities that exist.